I'm here this afternoon with Gary and Christian. Hello, boys.
Hi, Karen.
Hello, Karen. Hello, Gary. Hello,
All right,
everybody.
Christian. Yeah. Oh, mate. All right.
So we've started off our talk about this premature baby because I've got this video. I don't know if I can put it out. We're going to see because the music. I don't know. It might be on Unscrambled because the music might be copyrighted. But what it is that Christian was telling me about this, and then I found the video you obviously watched where they're going to amusement arcades, and in there, when you get there, there's all these premature babies, which just seems
Well,
weird
I
to
mean,
me.
Christian, I only watched it this morning. It was quite distressing for me, and basically, it was saying that they was taking them off of sort of like unmarried mothers because of the shame of it. Now I know this did go a little.
Yeah, all the responsibility was put on the woman.
I mean, my mum told me like that it was quite shameful back in the war and whatever if you was an unmarried mother, but this seems to be that the numbers seem to don't compute here. It's like I think it could be some kind of ruse and maybe they had their own form of IVF.
What they were doing was, because we watched the video,
Yeah.
he shows you pictures where there's no people around in any of the
There's
towns.
no people anywhere.
And then they bring the incubator babies or the infants, and then that's
Yeah.
it. Those places are now, got populated.
So what is your opinion on that with the huge numbers of babies like and they're all premature and whatever? You got any ideas on that, Christian?
Well, I was always under the belief, around about a time frame of the late part of the 18th century, that people were being press ganged onto boats to repopulate the earth, or repopulate certain areas of the earth. But then when you watch this and you see all these empty cities beforehand, and a short while later there's people there, and you see like right across America, like 80,000 incubator places. Well, I mean, obviously in various parts and various cities, but you think, where did this spring from? Who produced it? And you just think, well,
Do you know, is it real though,
about
can I say, Christian? You don't think it's another sort of like poo-poo thing they put in? Because, like when we were looking through the video, there's a few things that guy didn't say. He didn't say anything about the Spanish-Mexican wars, which were going on at the gold rush time. And that is history which should be included. And there was a few things that he didn't really... it was a brilliant video, but he excluded. Like, we were looking at the pictures, and I said, Gary, those pictures don't look real.
Well, another thing as well, Christian, we've got to take a discerning view now on everything because we know everything's a lie. But I'm wondering to myself, what's the reality in them pictures? They could easily sort of like Photoshop them to sort of like remove all the people, to sort of like show that the streets are empty. But
I mean, those videos look like they were the 1950s.
So do you think the people that you see later on was the orphan children grown up, Christian?
Yes.
Or what? Yes, that's what it is, isn't it?
If you listen to what they say, yes, that's it.
That was basically what they're saying, weren't they? They were saying like that there wasn't no people, and then all of a sudden you see people again. So all the adults have disappeared. So it was all the orphans like grown up to sort of like teenagers or in their 20s or 30s, yeah.
Well, this is one of the main questions that I keep coming across myself. Many other researchers have gone the same direction. They see all these empty cities.
Well, do you know what I thought, Christian, before you carry on yours? Like, when you see all the empty towns, I said, what did they do? Did they say that a big catastrophe was happening and they got everybody on ships and took them away or whatever? Or are they, like Gary wondered whether they were in quarantine?
Yes, I actually thought to myself, well, it's very similar to what we were going through with lockdown like a little while ago. Were these people, did they have a similar situation in the 18th century, Christian, where the people were into a false lockdown like we're going through at this particular moment in time? Well, not this particular moment in time, but we have been, and it looks like we're going to go again before too long, maybe. So what do you think? Is that a possibility?
Well, there's a huge similarity with what's going on today to what went on in the early part of the 1900s. But then when you go back another century, you've got very similar similarities that we have what's going on today. But it's almost like the population just vamooshed out of thin air, and you think...
So, Joe, it's like, though, I have a feeling that Alaska and Russia look at extra land and that we come from this extra land. But when they're trying to say, oh, God, this world, it's falling to pieces, we need to get out of here, people are going to be happy that they're going to be taken away, and if they said we're going to, I can't think of a name.
They'd still go with it. I mean, what I
they would still go on the ships and go.
Do you know what I find really bizarre, Christian, at the moment? Not just here, like where I live and all over. It seems like nothing's really much changed because everyone has still got their mask on one thing or another, and I agree with Karen. If anybody come on the telly, I'm not going to say too many names, we don't want to get into any trouble, but anyone come on the telly and said, right, everyone's got to get onto the boats and go to sort of like Alaska or the northeast part of Canada or something like that, I think people would blink and go. This is how brainwashed they are. They just go along with it.
But all towns are empty. That's the bit. But all towns.
Yeah, but the thing is, them photographs as well. You would see the odd person here and there because if someone's removing people, it's very difficult.
Well, I actually wondered
without leaving residue.
We've seen bricks, haven't we, Christian, that are burnt out. Sorry, we've seen rubble that's burnt out with bricks in it. I mean, they could have done some somatic thing over us, and it killed all the people.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I think them photographs are pretty genuine, Christian, because if you do look, very often you get residue of where people were and things like that. It's very difficult to remove hundreds of people from photographs, isn't it, Christian? So completely.
Yeah. I mean, I've come across where people have been washed out of photographs in various places from various researchers. But I mean, it seems like the exodus, if you remember going back 1,000 years or whatever it happened, 2,000 years, the exodus of people leaving an area, and you begin to understand that this is the sort of thing that seems to be happening, where people just disappear. Like Karen just said, the towns and cities are all empty, and it's like, was Britain used to repopulate America, New Zealand, Canada, America?
Yeah, so I agree with that, because in this video he says there's no one in all that they've got those little things there.
But they still don't answer the question.
They've got the Wi-Fi.
They've got the Wi-Fi there.
But
don't answer the question, Christian.
There's nobody in the other towns, but there's people in England.
What actually happens to the rest of the people? What happens to the adult population? This is the $1 million question. Was there some kind of sort of like mass cull where sort of like they were going around shipping people off and bloody killing them or something? I mean, they've got to be somewhere or they're dead. It's one or the other, isn't it? It's only two. In this particular situation, there's two answers. They're either dead or they're alive and somewhere else. What other answer can there be?
Yeah, it's like the orphan trains from the 1800s. There was a mass exodus of orphan trains being delivered to various places. I mean, they were even asking for people's children back in the 1800s, sell your child or whatever.
That's right.
And when you consider...
Yeah, but these are premature babies.
But what the thing is with these ones, it's slightly different. I mean, we did see that where there was even a woman outside and she had like a sign up. It's like sort of like a salesperson with a foot said, I've got 4 babies for sale, like not within
this
kind
video
of thing.
somewhere,
and you think to yourself, my God, I mean, what kind of woman is that? But there's a sign there and she's saying that. But that is slightly different than the ones with the incubators that we're looking on the screen there, Christian, whereby it seems like they've got some kind of mass production company. Infant incubators where they're sort of like mass producing like...
See, incubators.
What? Yeah. Infant incubators. It's almost like they're mass producing like babies on a grand scale. How though? I mean, it was
Well, maybe they weren't their babies. Maybe they were the Tartarians.
It's very over the top. I mean, with the amount of babies, you can expect like maybe a couple of thousand throughout the country, but not 80,000. That's like on mass production. It's with these babies.
They look like little wood burners, don't they?
I mean, the thing is, that is my point, Christian. If you go back, try and think things a deeper way. Where did these babies come from? Because you know how difficult it can be, like to ordinary. Some couples go right through life.
Yeah.
Well, I've known couples like that have tried for babies all their life, and they can't naturally do it. And when they've both been for sort of like tests, they've both been fertile, but for some reason it just don't happen. But it seems like here, hey presto, there's like 80,000 or thousands and thousands and thousands of babies that sort of like.
But we know that the pictures are fake. About sitting them all together and pretending they look like families, when actually all they were orphan children and they were looking after them. So there's in America, that's what started me off on all this, that we came from Orphans. That's
But,
one of my. Hang on, that's one of my
sorry.
videos.
Okay, I know that. Yeah, yeah.
Is that we came from orphans?
But you know, like in them fairs that you see, people could actually walk around there, so that couldn't have been fake because.
Okay,
you could
I'll
walk
have that
around-
one there. It's 3 months to go in an incubator. I'll have that one.
You can walk round and then choose one of your babies out of the incubator and say, "Oh, I'll have that one there." So you know, where did they come from? I mean, it's like I really find this a very bizarre subject for the simple reason they had to come from somewhere. They've got to come from somewhere.
And that's the eerie part of it, isn't it? When you think about it, did I come from perhaps a clone or an orphan baby? You know, and there's no subject matter that you could buy these babies, or like Karen just said, you could sell these babies. And you think, where do we really live? You know, when
I mean, the ones we're looking at right now. This is the guy that made some of the incubators, and these babies are tiny. They're premature babies he's holding.
Yeah, and I mean
exactly.
I mean the thing is they're all premature, which seems like, I mean, you do get loads of premature babies, but you have no history. That is the word. The history of where these babies come from before you see them in the incubator. We get where I'm coming from, Christian. That's what I want to know. Where was where did they come from before they was in the incubator?
We'll never find that out now.
I mean, we're never going to find it out now, but I'm saying, even at the time, these questions should have been asked. If someone come along and said, well, who's the father and who's the mother, or is there no mother and father? Are they literally like the 18th century version of test tube babies?
Do you see how fake it is? Look at his nose.
Yeah.
Does that look real to you?
No, it doesn't, does it?
Everything looks not real in the pictures.
The thing is, Christian, that is my point. I'm thinking to myself, because like, you know what I'm like, I always look things like really deeper, and where did they originate from in the first place before they got it? Because we're not being told that, are we? I mean, I don't know if.
But that would make sense. Why my bloodline is my family? They said came from Europe. They were incubator babies brought over here.
Well, do you know something? It's the same. Me and Karen have spoke about this before. I think we've done a show about it. She said to me, where's your family come from? I said, well, my dad family comes from Wales, and my mum's family are Flemish, like from Belgium. So there really is like a wild mix. There's not many English people. When you look back in your history, there's most people find that there isn't actually many actually English people.
Oh, look
all
at that.
come from elsewhere.
Fortune and gift round the baby incubators.
Yeah, it seems really sick and bizarre. I mean, now if I went to sort of like a theme park or something and they had this, I'd say, how sick is this? You know, you're going into like
the nurses looked after them. I mean, that looks like a premature baby there, doesn't it?
You're going into a theme park like with loads of like babies and incubators, and I think it just seems macabre and sick. What do you think, Christian? You know,
that one looks a bit more modern. That one, that incubator.
Yeah, I agree with you, Gary. It's eerie and macabre, and the people's mentality. I mean, they were actually paying. They were paying like whatever, it's 2 cents or whatever, to go and see a premature baby, and you think, you know,
they seem to like things like that. Then remember, you've got people who were like. Elephant Man was in it. Well, you know, like as long as they got something wrong with them, oh, come and look at the freaks.
Well, if you remember, like Barnum used to have like sideshows, didn't he? Where they used to have like the bearded lady and sort of like a giant in there, and like the sort of like the mermaid and things like that. So in those days, Christian, people were into this kind of thing. You know, P.T. Barnum made a living out of going around finding like, you know, dwarfs and strange and sort of like Siamese twins and whatever to put into his sideshow. But this to me is one step even more macabre and sick. Do you agree? You know, this is.
There's a 5 there.
Totally.
You know, that seems more plausible than this. I mean, as sick as what it is like going to a sideshow.
That's what he thought.
Eugenics, yeah. But you know, it's still sick like going to a sideshow and seeing like a bearded lady that probably had a beard glued on and sort of like, you know, the mermaid and things like that.
Maybe they did. Maybe they were hairy.
But
you
actually
get people like that today.
I mean, you know, if someone said to me, I'm going to a theme park tomorrow, and I say, well, what is it?
Hey, let's go. Let's go to watch some incubators.
We're going to watch like a load of incubators like with premature babies in it, and you can actually, if you want, buy one if you've got enough money. And you think to yourself,
Gary, we're buying a baby.
That's the most sickest thing I think I've ever heard.
Where's the laws and rules for that? As after what they did to women and made them responsible and that's why in the end, well, you're responsible. You can't work if you have a baby. You've got to sell it. Yeah. So that's how it all sort of starts, and then they get into the incubator bit.
But you know,
what do they do? Induce them so that they gave birth early.
But I mean,
and then instead of them dying, they took them and put them in incubators, and it was an experiment.
I mean, there is another thing to say.
But then, how could
this.
they be so advanced in the middle 1850s?
Christian, the only other way, they had some kind of breeding program where they had loads of women that would literally just sort of like breeding. Basically, they had like loads of blokes sort of like you know, making it like with women, and there's a non-stop sort of like stream of babies. But that don't seem feasible either to me. It's like the numbers involved when you're thinking about 80,000.
If you get pregnant, it's your responsibility.
Yeah.
And what it is you can't work with the baby, so we're going to take it away from you. Why would you want to get pregnant?
So my point is, Christian. So say for argument's sake, you had a woman like that got pregnant, like they had like this like factory where basically all their job was, it's like someone who worked in a factory. You know, let's not beat around the bush. Having it off, like getting a woman pregnant, like, and then got to wait 9 months to have the baby. And as soon as the baby's born, like, it's born premature, like they do a C-section or something, take the baby away and put it in an incubator. To me, that sounds too far-fetched. To me, that sounds similar to what I was thinking about the moon landings back in the early 80s. It sounds far-fetched to me. It's something else. You with me, Christian? It's not that. It's something else.
I mean, I'd say it was probably unbelievable. But when you realise that there was more than one of these places, there was quite a few of these places spread throughout America, and you think, well, obviously there's got to be a certain amount of truth to it, as there was that many places. But when you think 80,000, and you think that's a lot, and it's almost like a business, you know, it is what it is, and it's like humanity.
Well, the nurses were looking after them.
Yeah, it just sounds so bizarre, but it's like.
How could you think? How could you ever think the national health was something good?
Another thing.
How could you think
sorry,
the national?
I know.
It's not a good thing. It's just a continuation of this.
But you know another thing as well, Christian. You know these things do tend to leak out, and if it was some kind of breeding program where they had like sort of like, you know, hundreds of women like just breeding. These babies, like just literally just breeders, like you know, like with people having like dogs, and they just have dogs for like breeding. If that was the case, it would have slipped out, wouldn't it? Or would it in the press? Like one of them would say, "Oh, do you realise?"
No, because they were already doing it to us then.
So basically,
he says in this video,
it
could be accidents that led to the history we got, or someone knew exactly what they were doing. They planned it all, and we're living out what they planned.
I think like it might be a mixture of both, like maybe sort of like women that are breeding babies, but on that scale, I think it's more than that. There's got to be some kind of IVF treatment they had, and some people are not going to like what I'm saying here, but if they look at this and see the numbers that we're looking at, because you know me and you are both good at numbers, Christian, and it don't tally. The numbers don't tally for sort of like some kind of breeding program with women.
Look how poor they are.
You know, a lot of women might watch this, like, and they're going to go, "I can't believe Gary said that. I think that's disgusting." Blah blah blah. But we're just working it out because you know your head works the same as mine, Christian. I know that, and we're thinking of the numbers involved, the huge numbers. It doesn't make sense, does it, mate?
No, I mean, when you take into respect the IVF treatment that so many thousands of people go through now to try and have a baby, even though the fact that both people may be fertile and they're still struggling to have a child, you think, well, what's really going on here? Is it because they may have been cloned babies? I don't know, but...
Yeah.
Well, they did bring blonde-haired, blue-eyed children in.
Well, look, I'll give you a little example that I know personally. A friend of mine, his daughter couldn't have babies naturally, had IVF treatment. They spent he actually gave them £10,000 to have it, like they couldn't get it on a national health service, and it still took years. She eventually had like a lovely couple of twins, I think, or a couple of kids. But the thing is, Christian, it was long and drawn out. It wasn't something overnight, and it took years of doing. I don't know whether the husband was infertile or whatever. I don't know the actual ins and outs of it, but I know it still took years. So, like you said, even couples that can be completely fertile, for some reason it just don't happen for them. It happens in a lot of you know, relationships. And this is like, it's almost like a a conveyor belt breeding program, isn't it?
She bought.
Yeah.
I can't remember what her name is, but she bought a baby from there. He reckoned from there. So let's go to like a World Fair sort of. I don't even think this looks real either. But let's go to a fair and when we're there, we'll just buy a baby.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that part of it that just sounds so
But don't
sick.
forget, they put electricity like that as well. They went to the fairs, so everybody wanted to buy get electricity once they've seen it at the fair.
I mean, you know, can you imagine, like, you just go to the fair, like, and then you go have a ride on the Dodgems, and you go on the Helter Skelter, you go on the Big Dipper and all that, and then
let's buy a baby.
Your missus turns around and says, "Oh, our two are sort of like grown up. Let's go to the incubator section, like, and we can actually just buy a baby just like that. You know, literally just like that. Walk in there and pay whatever the amount was and buy a baby."
Because he said, why weren't they having their own babies?
Exactly. It just sounds so sick. It sounds like it sounds about the worst thing. I think all the things I've looked at, apart from sort of like adrenochrome. This is up with adrenochrome for me.
This is the law they set up, isn't it? So that women were totally responsible.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, the numbers still don't tally up for me with taking babies off of unmarried mothers, like, and just taking them away because, like, you know, it was such a sin, like, to be. I mean, you look around you now, like, you see. Well,
women, that's still on us today. That feeling.
Well, you see women. I'm not
saying that
with loads of babies.
People don't care the same, but you know, for our generation, the thought of being pregnant, not in wedlock, doesn't feel right.
But you still see it all the time.
No, but that's what we were taught.
Yeah, exactly. But my point is, Christian, like I was saying earlier, what I've seen in this video this morning, that the numbers don't tally up. Even if you had a breeding program with loads of women, you're not going to have that. You're not going to have that number, are you? The numbers are too great.
Here you go. Here's the empty towns.
And these are the empty towns here. They're like completely empty, and you also, you know, cooperating with the mud flood, because a lot of these buildings, as we know, you know, some of them weren't structurally sound, come down, but a lot of them have got like not just one story, maybe sort of like a couple of stories underground. So there was some cataclysmic event, obviously.
Yeah, look, there's nobody there. What were they out at 6 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, if you hear what he said, where the shade of that tower, he said it must have been he worked out roughly about 10 o'clock in the morning. Now, all right, I know you get late risers and whatever, but you still would have seen like a few people walking around, Christian, wouldn't you, at 10 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah. I mean, I think what it is, what we're going through a realisation that people are waking up to the true history of where we live and the true history of what's happened in the past. They're clicking onto the fact, like 1918, the Spanish flu, and then you can go back to the 1800s where there's very similar things happening, and even back in the 1700s, and you think, it's just like, are they doing it in waves where it's like population control? But like you said, right now, people are still struggling to have babies, and they're paying huge sums with the IVF treatment and all the other treatments that come along with it. And you think, well, what is really going on? Is it just business? You know, business, the act of commerce, you know, to buy and sell. You know, when you think that comes into the equation, is this what we are going right back through our history?
The really strange is the people with just, I don't know whether you feel the same or whether you feel the same, but you've got a feeling that when the people with the big buildings that are about 9 acres big, those people, it seems, they were much more in harmony. Whatever was going on, it was nicer. Maybe they were richer, I don't know. And then we had something happen in the 1800s, and then something else happens later on, and those ones are digging out all the mud.
Yeah. You know another thing as well, Christian, what you're saying about like going back to...
I'm just showing all the empty towns, Christian.
Back to 1918 and before that, the 18th century, maybe the 17th century. I think all throughout history, you've had people like us. You've had, like, in the Second and First World War, you had conscientious objectors that didn't want to go to war, didn't want to kill people. Actually, this morning, I was watching something about Charlie Chaplin on the TV this morning, and in 1914. They wondered why he didn't want to go to war in the trenches, but he actually sort of like just went around and done his bit, like, you know, entertain the troops and one thing and another. And, you know, who knows, maybe deep down he was a conscientious objector. And there's a lot of people at the time saying, oh, how comes he's not out there like with the troops on the front line? And the thing is, it's the same thing with me. Even long before this great awakening that all happening, it's happening now. I wouldn't want to go and kill someone. If sort of like I was born in the Second World War, I'm not a coward. I'm not a coward at all. I've had loads of fights with people over the years. I'm not a coward. If someone knocked on my door and said, "Oh, you're being conscripted now. You've got to sort of like come with us and one thing or another," I'll turn around and say, "Well, no, mate. You better lock me up in prison because I'm not going to kill someone who I don't know. I don't believe in it." You know, so maybe throughout history there's been people like us, and what happened to them in previous times? And not just conscientious object. What happened to everybody in when you see these like
what the hell's
cities?
happened to us?
What you know what has happened, Christian, to people in all these cities like then, just before the sort of like orphan trains? What happened to the people like between sort of like, I don't know, 15 and blinking 70 or 80? Where did they
And
all
one other
go?
thing, he doesn't think what everybody's finding under the ground is another civilization. He thinks it's the ones that built the big buildings. It's their civilization got mud flooded or...
That's right. And then there are people that come along, but there must have been people then, Christian, that started asking questions, looking at these magnificent structures, saying, well, or did they? Was they so dumbed down? Because they was like the people from the orphan trains, it's like they didn't realise that sort of like, oh, well, yeah, we've been told like this has all been built like, you know, and just went along with it.
Children don't come with history. You know,
children don't come with history, that's right.
They have to, like, they get it from their parents and their family. If they're coming as babies, they're not going to have any history.
So they believe what they're told, and what does that sort of like seem like there's a similarity to what's happening today, Christian, with the things that we can't speak about? Some people just believe what they're told and don't question things, but even in those days, there must have been people that looked at all this and thought, hang on a minute, how did we build this stuff sort of like hammer and chisel?
Well, even that with what the children were working on, all these machines.
Yeah.
He said, where's the adults?
Yeah, that's right, because all the orphans, they were put in all the sort of like workhouses, weren't they? But the thing is, yeah, that's a very good point, actually. If the orphans were sort of like made to go to work, they didn't know any different. So my question is, what happened to all the adults? Because the adults had to be somewhere, or were they all just sort of like cold?
Well, the thing, isn't it, Gary? When you look at pictures from all around the world, and you see all these factories and mills, and they're all being operated by children, you know, and there was a lot of mills that were being operated by children, and you've got like the odd person that's instigating or directing the workplay, and you think, well, what happened to all the previous people?
Exactly.
Where are they? You know, it's like Karen says, that at one point all these cities are empty. You know, there's not a human to be seen anywhere.
London there was.
You're talking about small cities, you know, when you're talking about St. Petersburg, Moscow, and places across America and even Australia had to be repopulated, you think, where did they go? You know, what happened to them?
I mean, the people. Something that's happened to the people. I mean, you know, let's work out the things that could have happened. That there was a cataclysm, like.
Oh, look! What's on the side of the newspaper?
There was a cataclysm.
Gary,
that killed
look.
them. What's that?
Swastikas.
Oh, blimey, yeah. There was a cataclysm that killed everyone, but that wouldn't explain why the orphans were spared, because, you know, there still would have been a few
but they're
adults.
like blank sheets. They don't have any history. They can't say, oh, I come from Germany. Oh, I come from America. Oh, I come from here.
No, but my point is like, if a cataclysm happened, which you know did, with some sort of liquefaction happened, you know, all these orphans.
Look
like,
how rough they are. He's got holes in his trousers. His clothes don't fit him. Look how rough they look. Because they got the children working.
Yeah, and they're all wearing adult-like clothes.
And in
yeah,
here,
they all look like Charlie
here,
Chaplin, actually, don't they? They've all got big baggy clothes.
Right, because this is obviously a video, right? So up here, where is it? That's him explaining how many children. I might go through that. Where was it?
But we're going through all these pictures, Christian. We're sort of like the buildings, and I mean the thing is,
that's the orphanage in London.
Now this orphanage here was the one that Charles Dickens used to frequent this place quite a lot, and it's absolutely massive.
Oh yeah, and also they gave us books, right? Let me just go.
The orphanage is like gigantic. It's like where are all the parents? You know, it's there's thousands.
It's a good way to have orphanages, right? So they gave us. Wait a minute. They gave us Well, those books about, yeah, those are other books, but they gave us, where are they? They gave us, oh, where are they? Got to go through this video, 1 second. I was trying to find it because basically, we've got different books that they gave us to read, and they all come from that time period. Look at that.
Yeah, I'm just saying when Gary talks
374 were found in
374,000.
processed.
Listen to this, Christian. We were talking about numbers, right? And like you said, this almost sounds sort of like very business-like, and it sounds sick and macabre. Before 1860, 374,000 foundlings processed in Milan, Naples and Florence. Just those three cities in Italy. 374,000. Where did they all come from?
Right, and to your response about the cataclysm, what sort of cataclysm, wipes out the race, the people there, but leaves the buildings? And when I come to the buildings, there's another thing about the buildings. A lot of the buildings, everywhere, you look searching it now for God knows how many years, and the one thing that there's a common factor, the original plaques of when the buildings were built have been removed and new ones been put on them, and you think, why do they do this? And you think, well, that creates a bit more confusion of who the builder was, who the architect was, and when you look into the buildings themselves, that very few in any of these pictures are damaged. You think, what sort of cataclysm can cause this? What?
Exactly, and also in the video earlier, I didn't know this, but apparently Bosch power tools have only been out since 1957. So anything before that, we're told like they're using were very basic sort of like pneumatic tools, I suppose, and hammer and chisel and kangos of the day, very sort of like rudimentary kangos. Now, like I've said before, with sort of like these buildings and all that, with regards to sort of like when I ask lorry drivers, you've only got to ask any builder. What would it take? That was a guy there. Now this is the guy here. You'll see this was like the early sort of like drills, and they were absolutely ludicrous. They were big, cumbersome, and this was only going back to sort of like, I think the drill. What was it? It's in 18 something. The drill, wasn't it? It was.
Well, whatever
Bosch,
they finished.
Well, put it this way. If you look at sort of like the technology and the machinery they had. It's impossible.
They just basically had spades.
It's the same thing again. Now he's got now. If you leave it on that one, Karen, he's got like a modern day Kango here, right? This guy, and you see him like going through a wall, and it's almost like they all did in those days. I suppose all were wearing bleeding suits, weren't they? No matter what they were doing.
There's numbers on there.
And he's got like this Kango machine, which looks like it's not pneumatic, it's electric because there's a cable going into it. But they want to lead us to believe that all the materials were taken there by horse-drawn carts and done with sort of like hammer and chisel and very rudimentary sort of like mechanical tools, and it's absolutely ludicrous. You can people when you speak to some people, they sort of like glaze up. They don't want to talk about it. But anyone
that's what we look like. That's what they're telling us we look like.
Anyone with a modicum of sense, they say these fantastic buildings all throughout the world. I mean, some of them structures in Moscow, like, and everywhere throughout the world.
We built
this one here, the Greco-Romanian sort of like kind of style buildings and all that. To think that there's people that built these places with basic bloody tools, the canals as well. And we done a show last night, Christian, maybe you want to see it when it comes out, about sort of like the underground. And, we were told like that thousands of navvies like built that. Well, my cousin, like, he worked on the Channel Tunnel, and he went to the rock face, and he said, Gal, he said, that machine was, you could hardly see it moving through at all. And we were told like all the underground was built like in a few years. It's like Crystal Palace was built in 5 months. Crystal Palace was built in 5 months supposedly. I mean, the foundation alone, Christian, would take 5 months to build Crystal Palace, because that we also incorporated that in it. But people don't think about these things. They just think, oh well, that was it. We were told, like, we've been told by the governments of the day, like, that the underground was built like this.
Women obviously didn't help, did they? Because they had long skirts.
But if you have a look at all the underground system, the intricacy of it and how it was built, I don't think they could do it now. I think if they had the same cutting, the same borers, what they done a Channel Tunnel with, it would take to do the whole of the network under the ground, like the whole of the underground network, I don't know, years
And don't
and
forget,
years and years
we've
and
got all
years.
those towns that I've done videos on right now. Centralia is one of them. That are exiting. All the people are leaving. That one was a bit later.
Yeah.
But in the 1800s, with this gold rush, and then they went bankrupt, and so don't buy gold because the moment you start flooding the market with gold, it'll all go down. So there's no big thing about gold. Even though they want gold, there's no big thing.
But I mean,
because Christian thinks it's all for gold, but all you've got to do is flood the market with a bit of gold and it'll be worth nothing.
exactly. The thing is, I mean, the last show that me and Christian done about gold, we think, I think I can speak with Christian as well. We think it's for an entirely different reason, because at the end of the day, it's a shiny bit of metal. It's used as currency, right? But in reality, like, you know, what is gold? I mean, when you go to sort of like brass tacks of things.
Here's a piece of gold. How much are you going to give me? I want to get some shopping, so what are you going to give me?
Exactly.
It's ridiculous.
But it's like I said, if there was a world war, Karen, and you went in with a big bar of gold, and you turned around and said, and people were, and the shopkeeper like had to look after his supplies of food, and you said to him, "Oh, I've got this. This is one of the
Great
original,
big lump of gold.
the original Brinks Mat bar. My old man like was a gangster and he was involved with it." And he'll just turn around and say to you, "Well, that's no good to me. Like, I've got a load of food here that I'm going to eat. What use is that gold to me?" People don't think of things deep enough. And it's like all this, what we're talking about now, with all this canal network and everything else. It was built with hammer and bloody chisels.
And they did it in weeks.
And you see, what they say with the underground network, Christian, they say like they had hundreds of thousands of navvies. I don't care how many you have, you still got to have the mechanical devices to build them. Do you agree?
Yeah. I mean, there's photos in the past that I've come across where you've got like a Victorian or Tartarian building, and that building's got another building below it. And when I came across this photograph, it made me laugh initially, but then I thought about the lie that we've all been told. And when you discover that that building's got another building below it, and that building's got another below it, I think there was 5 different buildings entire, right?
You're joking. It actually went down 5 stories underneath.
Yeah, and you can actually see that the lowest building...
But that's the same with in New York, you know, with the house, what is it called there? The American one?
The White House, yeah.
The White House is the same. It's floors underneath the ground.
So go on, Christian, carry on, yeah.
The lowest building, you can still see the chimney stack from below the ground. You know, it's still got the chimney stack attached to it. That's the lowest building.
You're joking.
No, I'm not joking.
So basically, what you're saying is the lowest floor, so you go 5 levels down, even that one. So there was a time when that was like the one that was sort of like that was the.
So maybe some of the hills are fake. They're just. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh.
So
right.
obviously,
there's a mound of earth. Oh, and someone built a house on the top of it.
There must have been mud flood or cataclysm after cataclysm over the
and
centuries.
They're just building on the top.
They're just using that as foundations.
Why does the mud settle so flat? I mean, I know you can see Lilini, Terra Pisa. You've got things that are leaning a bit, but why did the mud flat? Why was it so flat?
But I suppose it's like concrete. If you ever sort of like see a foundation laid, even you sort of like have to stipple it out to make it all. I've done a little bit to make it all flat. Even if you leave it, it will go reasonably, as long as it's sort of like at a certain viscosity. It will go to a certain level. It's like water finding its level. So I think the mud eventually will. You see what I'm saying, Christian? It will find some kind of level, won't it?
Yeah.
To a certain degree, but I mean
even some of the Romano-Greco buildings in London, underneath has been found, have got previous Roman buildings underneath, and you think, well, obviously there was another cataclysm in prior times, you know. And when you establish that, one of the things that I learned as a child was that, I was a teenager when I read about it, that the Romans built their buildings on the foundations of a previous civilization. So you can go back in time and think, well, the Romans learned something of a previous culture.
Yeah, on this one's in Paris, right? What they reckoned was it's 85 million gigabytes.
No, 95 million kilograms. But the real part about this is, Christian, with the Arc de Triomphe, right? What he was saying, it's brilliant, this bloke, because the way he picks up on little details that other people I haven't even heard, sort of like John Levi pick up and whatever. What he turned around and said was, he said, at the time when the photograph was taken, it was only meant to be about 40 years old, but it was already, there was deterioration. It was already tainted and all deterioration, which you get over about sort of like, it would take probably maybe
Also,
100,
not just
150
that,
years.
this bit was built in 1806, and this bit was built in 1832.
I mean, it's an absolutely fantastic structure, but the timescales that were told that these places took to build with sort of like rudimentary tools, but also the deterioration on the fascia of it proves that it wasn't, that the information we've been given is definitely false of when it was built, because deterioration gives it a couple of centuries or a century or so, rather than sort of like the 40 years what they said was deterioration. See where I'm coming from? So
yeah, I think when you talk about things like the Arc de Triomphe, these giant arches, I think that's got to do again.
Oh, don't forget they moved it as well. They moved the thing. How did they do that?
Yeah, I didn't know they moved it.
Yeah, they moved the one in London as well, outside Buckingham Palace.
It's got to do with magnetics, magnetrons, electromagnetic frequency.
Levitation.
I think it's in St. Petersburg. They've got one made entirely out of copper, and it's humongous. It's a giant one, you know. So you know it wasn't built by people like us, not our size anyway. So, you know, when you put that together, you think, why would anybody build an arch? It's all massive, made out of copper. You know, entirely made out of copper. The whole structure is copper.
And even forming, I know copper's quite an easy metal to work like. I've worked with it, but when you see some of these structures, I'll pick up on that, like the one in Moscow. When you see sort of like all the dome roofs on it, and they said like it's all like made out of metal. I mean, even today, Christian, to do that it's a task and a half. It's just like it's mind-boggling. Like the material, not just the materials, like the way of actually doing it, the techniques. That's the word I was looking for. The techniques they had to have to do this, even if they had the bloody machinery to do it, which we've been told like they haven't, and we're looking now.
It's laughable.
It's laughable. And the thing is, Christian, you know, you speak to any builder or any stonemason, right, and if they be honest with you, and you said to them that the thing we're looking at right now, right, this sort of like magnificent sort of like architecture and this sort of like all these sculptures, and said to him, right, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm a multi-millionaire. I'll give you £1 million. I'll give you £1 million, and I will give you £1 million. I'll go and see a solicitor. You got to make it exactly the same. I don't think there's a stonemason alive a day that can do it. Impossible. They can't do it. I don't think it, even if they devoted the rest of their life, if they were sort of like, say, a master stonemason, you'd have to be about 50 to be a master, because it takes years to perfect. And some of these sort of like statues, and you said to them, I want it identical to that. I don't think that this particular one that we're looking at now, I don't think you could do it, Christian. I really don't. It's impossible. I don't think there's a stonemason alive today that could do it. Listen, I beg to differ.
What do they look like?
You might get a truther out there to say, "Oh, I'm not
Gary,
a truther."
what do they look like, really? Romans.
Right, they look like Romans.
That one looks more like a queen, but they look more like Romans.
I mean, the thing is, like, I don't think there's a stonemason alive today that could do this. And
is that what happens though? Every so many years, they just get rid of us.
But
it's beginning to sound like that, Karen.
It sounds like it, doesn't it? It sounds like there's a reset of sorts. Where do we go? I mean, literally, do we get rounded up? Do we get herded off? Do we get herded off?
There won't be any amazing architecture from our time, will there?
I mean, you know, is current events happening to dumb down people even further, so they can just come along and take them away somewhere?
Yeah, that's the roof of the thing.
Now the roof is absolutely like exquisite, and you know, it's just mind-boggling. Like, you know, listen, I'm not a sculptor, I'm not a painter or anything. To make all this stuff,
they definitely wanted to show they were in control
when they're carving this stuff out, you know, and how they did it. It's just.
Well, when you look at I think it's New York train station and Boston train station.
That's right, we've got that.
And you just see the sheer size of them. And I've already posted about it on Facebook and various other places, that when you look at the base, the actual base, you know, like you've got your living room, you've got a skirting board, right?
Yeah.
Now, when you see the people in the New York train station, and you can see like the skirting in there, the people barely stand up to the skirting. Yeah, the size of the skirting.
So it was definitely built for giants then.
Well, what do you think?
Has to be. I mean, some people in our community, like, you know, when you mention giants, they do tend to sort of like shy away from it because it just sounds too incredible. Now, this is the one here I'm talking about. A lot of that is like copper.
Oh yeah, and they banged it into all those shapes.
And they banged it, and it's hand beaten in Moscow, like this. You know, the building with all the sort of the Tartaria structure with all the with all the sort of like the domes on it. Well, a lot of that was copper at the top, and it was hand beaten into shape. Well, a human can't do it. I can't see a human being able to do it. It's sort of someone about sort of like, I don't know, 50 foot tall or something. I mean, you know. To think you could hand beat that, look at that. That's just absolutely incredible. It's off the scale. It's all hand beaten.
Especially as they always want to make Russia into like a third world country.
Yeah, and I mean...
Can I just say, we've been going for nearly an hour on this subject. Did you want to talk about anything else?
Do you want to...
Well, it all connects with what we started with.
It's all connection, really, isn't it? It's pretty much connected.
Everything we're talking about is connected through the point of the baby incubators going like backwards in time. I mean, everything is about the change of what we are. Yeah, when you look at it in perspective of the change over of populations, it's like people being pushed into areas, and it's exactly what's happening today in Britain, in Australia, in America, even in Canada, where populations are being mixed again. You know, it's like Gary says, is it to dumb down the populace? You know,
that's it. I've done Crystal Palace.
Now, the
Christian. Wait a minute.
Sorry, we've got Crystal Palace.
Yeah,
here.
we've got Crystal Palace. I mean, the two towers either side look weird. It looks like an airport, and the guy says they managed to do all this without any manufacturers making glass.
Yeah, and they said they done this, folks. You're going to love this one. In 5 months.
5 months.
From start to finish, including the two towers, and Karen picks up on a very good point when we looked at it. They did look like, you know, like a lot of the airship sort of like towers that you see, Christian, where sort of like the airship is sort of like plotted up like, and people are getting onto the airship. Well, there's two towers at the end, and they look like they could possibly be for that. But we've been led to believe that this, from start to finish, right, was built in 5, because I first of all I turned around and said, no, Karen.
It was all destroyed by 1937.
I had a very friendly heated discussion with Karen, like we get into sometimes. I said, no, I said, you got it wrong. I said, didn't I? I said, you mean 5 years? She said, no, Gal, 5 months. So she meticulously went through to actually show me, because I actually disagree. We don't disagree.
It's not on this video. It's on my video.
But we don't disagree on much, me and Karen. But I actually said to her, I said, no, I disagree with you. I said, you mean 5 years, and even then it'd be at a stretch with like thousands of work.
Well, yeah, because we already know, don't you? I mean, you live in London.
Yeah.
The O2 Arena took years to make.
Well, look at the O2, like there was an absolute claptrap compared to this, and this was supposedly taken 5 months. And this, what you got to remember,
do you know what that looks like? An airport to me.
Was still built with sort of like rudimentary stuff
on Zeppelins, isn't it? Like you said, that might be meeting there, but then they got to go.
But the thing is, Christian, this was still built with sort of like with horse-drawn carriages, and
God
like,
knows what that is.
And all the wrought ironwork and whatever, you know, it was just sort of.
It looks amazing, but I've told you it doesn't look right at the same time. Like these grounds don't look as grand as they should be. I just don't know.
But all the glass like there, like it's all shaped. It's all shaped glass and one thing and another, which is just absolutely mind-boggling to think like the technology and procedures used to make this place, and then, you know. If anyone alive today reckons they can make that in 5 months, they're a better man than me.
Do you see that down there, like a Chinese woman? Look, I keep finding pictures in the pictures.
And then when you see some of the other pictures of this, Christian, when you sort of like see like a person, like this one here, how minuscule the people are going up to it, and look, and then you see the magnificence of this place. And then it's suddenly, like a lot of the other World Fair places, like suddenly mysteriously burns down. I think
this, even though this was 1850, this was one of the first World Fairs.
It was one of the first ones. And then of course, we know what the temperatures are like of wrought iron. I think it must be about 3,000 degrees centigrade. I could be wrong there, up to 4,000 or something. And then glass like that as sort of like some kind of melting point, but that's probably like just as high. And then all of a sudden, this place burns down to the ground. I mean, I know there's like combustibles inside, like there's trees and wooden stuff and one thing. But this place to actually catch fire and
There wasn't much left of it, was it? It was just rubble.
I mean, it has similarities like to an event happened 20 odd years ago, where you just know it can't possibly happen with.
But did they build that on top? Because I said in my video, this is brick down here.
Yeah, but that's all
and
the
that
foundations.
is metal and glass. Brick, metal and glass.
I mean, Christian, I'm sure you'd agree with me, this. But the foundations alone, with Crystal Palace, with a great weight involved, that would have taken more. That would have taken more than 5 months, surely. The foundations
So,
alone.
but you look at it, it's really modern and brilliant, but at the same time, is that really out of this world? I don't mean that
Gary's got
rudely.
the point that the actual foundations, it would have had to be built on what is absolutely solid ground, a bit like the pyramids of Giza, built on a solid block, if you like.
But
And
they didn't mind building big buildings in those days. They had to be about 9 acres big.
Well, Crystal Palace wasn't the only one. There was one very similar. I think there was another one identical to Crystal Palace. But when you consider that they had actually buildings inside Crystal Palace, as well as giant trees.
I didn't see buildings myself. I saw metal. So it looked like someone had come in and said, if we had to do this the cheapest way, what you're going to do is you're just going to put metal cages everywhere and then have the floors on the metal cages so they could bring them in. But they still had to make millions of metal cages to fill the building.
I mean, the thing is, the superstructure itself was probably sort of like wrought iron or something like that. And then, obviously, like there's hundreds of thousands like of panes of glass of various sizes. But I mean, the actual logistics of it it's mind blowing. If you went into into a glassmaker today and said like you wanted this, that, and the other, he'd probably turn around and say, I'd have to get every single glassmaking company in the UK to help me.
Why isn't there lots of big houses down here then? Why do they look quite small and we've got this thing here?
But
well, it's like Gary said, at the time they said that the Crystal Palace was built, that the glass manufacturing factories that were around could only make so many per year, and that distributes or totally knocks it out of the picture of how Crystal Palace was built, because the mathematics don't equate.
The mathematics don't add up, Christian, because if you went into every sort of like every place that is a glazers in the whole of the UK, Wales, Scotland combined, even Ireland, if you want to bring Ireland into the equation, and said, how many of these can you do? It's such a monumental task. I mean,
how do you not know that wasn't a church? And all they've done is they've taken a steeple off here and a steeple off here. This could have been more like a church.
One of the things I would say, I think some of these places were built by a previous civilization, which we got no idea of the time frame of, because I've done my own research on a lot of paintings and of buildings that are around today. And if you do a comparison with these buildings, right, in these paintings that have got people in them, right, and then you go to a photograph of the same building in modern day, you will see that the people in the photograph of the modern day of the building are a certain size. Then you go to the painting and you think, holy smoly, these people are twice the size and higher.
Yeah.
There's many of these paintings that you can go through and look for yourself. And you think, well, now this would explain how Crystal Palace was built. It was built by bigger people who had
still wouldn't have been able to done it in 5 months though, Christian.
Never.
There's no way on God's green earth that if there was people like there was
I don't see those statues really big.
3 or 4 times the size of us now, that I could see this place being built from start to finish, because that's what the official narrative is. From start to finish, it was 5 months, and it just is completely inconceivable.
I mean, look how square it is.
And it's such a monumental sort of like structure.
And why did it have these brick things either side?
Well, that's
all glass and metal, and this is brick, and then
it's
they've got
like
different bricks here.
They've got one of them down at Brentford. If you ever sort of like go down Brentford way, Christian, it's still there. They've got one of these kind of towers just the north side of Kew Bridge. I was coming back from Bristol one day, and I took a photograph of it with my phone as we were going past on the flyover light on the A4 flyover, going back to sort of like Hammersmith, and these things are quite similar. Now we're told they're water towers, but were they used for something else? Were they something completely different? Were they sort of like for airships, dirigibles or whatever they're blinking called, to park up on? I don't know. But I mean, you know, Crystal Palace and it's all its splendour. I've never really, you know, I've seen Crystal Palace before, but I didn't realise the splendour of it, and it's just absolutely mind-boggling and amazing to think that this place was built, and I can't see.
And that it just was a bunch of rubble at the end.
And it's just a bunch of rubble, and let's face it, I'm probably about average size, and I'm about 5'11", something like that. So, loads of little people like built all this place, and you know, you never hear about. I actually sort of like said to Karen, I said it's similar to the ISS now. It's our version of our version now is the ISS. You never see sort of like construction work done on this. You see it completed, like you don't see the ISS. You know, the most magnificent thing that cost billions, like it cost 34 billion or whatever it was, the ISS. You get no sort of like videos of it actually being constructed. You don't see this being constructed. It's almost like you've gone to bed one day, you woke up in the morning, like the most magnificent Mandela effect of all time, and voila, it's just there in 5 months. You know, mate, I know people like that are sort of like been out boozing for longer, and longer than 5 months. And can you imagine, like, they gone out boozing, so they're in a stupor for 5 months, and all of a sudden they look out their window like in Annerley or Crystal Palace, like, my God, that weren't there before. It don't make sense.
It takes months to build buildings.
It comes back to the thing about these buildings, right? And one of the architects, I can't remember what his name was. I mean, one of them I think was Paxton, but the other one that was attributed to all the buildings in America, Australia, Canada, and Britain. And you think this guy must have been working at light speed to be attributed to building all these buildings, and you think, how is that even possible? And then over the years, over the last decade, when you look at all these researchers that have tried to find the blueprints of the actual building, there's never any blueprints to be found.
Something else is a bit weird that I noticed it with the Titanic. There's always a colour on the glass which makes it look much older. Just, you know, it happens with the Titanic. It didn't look new, it looked old. It looked like something they were resurrecting and pretending it was new. When you looked at the actual hull, you could tell it had all been repaired. And I think this place looks the same, because obviously these people didn't build it. But I don't think the pictures look right. I just don't know. I don't know. I don't know if they look real. But it is crazy, because you can't work it out.
Well, this is what I'm saying about the confusion that you realise that is out there. I mean, we take everything for granted when we're reading the history books that were written over the last 70, 80 years or whatever. Even some of the books that go back almost 100 years, they've only been written in that time period. But there's a guy I followed a while back, and he says he better off reading the earlier versions, the first editions, before a certain time frame. It's like you say, Tartarian was gone by 1925 to 30, and you think, well, the books that came before it are different. You have to read these early editions, and then you begin to understand the world in a better place, because everything that we've learned is more or less confused us even more. Like Gary said, as we progress through time, the masses get more dumbed down from day to day. You know, people with their phones today, they'll just answer to whatever they see on the screen rather than question it.
Now, Christian, what you were saying earlier about, I think this is it. Karen has now got up like New York Grand Central Station or something like that. Now, this thing here is absolutely tremendous. It's mind-boggling, and it's the gigantic nature of it for sort of like little people. It doesn't make sense. You know, if you say an average person is, say, I don't know, an average man is 5 foot.
Yes, but those lights aren't that tall, are they?
5'10". The lights aren't tall, but they could have been put in artwards. But the actual structure itself, I mean, the roof is like about, I don't know, I'd hate to put.
But we don't know what these buildings really are, and they've turned it into that.
Well, of course, it is the Freemasons.
That could be a church.
Freemasons. They're taken into it. It could have been a church originally. It could have been something else. But the actual giant nature of this, like of this station is like it's just mind-boggling. It's just
Well, yeah. I mean, this is what I said about the when you see the size of the pillars or the size of the corner walls, and the base is the skirting, right? The base is the skirting.
Yeah.
So, and I've done enough skirting.
No,
that's a skirting up to there. Look.
Yeah.
That is a skirting.
That there's a whole bit. There's a whole window in there. The skirting is.
No, I know what you mean. I mean, you mean sort of like the lower bit that made out of sort of like stonework. It looks basically like a
but he doesn't look real, does he? Look,
a representation of the skirting.
Yeah, but that person's been put in. That person's not real. They're almost faded out of the picture.
we can't see any doors here, like, but I suppose the doors are absolutely gigantic as well. There must be. No, the actual doors to the place, not the little doors. Well, look the size of that. That's a window, isn't it?
Mm.
But anyway, I mean, if the doors are the sort of like same sort of like dimensions, it's absolutely like.
Why do they want to build everything so big?
Exactly. Why would for human beings of our stature would they build this too big? It doesn't. I know they want the grandeur and the splendour of it, Christian. But even so, this is monumentally big. It don't make sense. It's illogical. When you think of the splendour of it and the cost and whatever. It just doesn't make sense. It
blows your mind away, doesn't it? It blows your mind away.
It really does. And all this ancient architecture that's still around. See, the thing is, if their mission was in the First and Second World Wars to sort of like destroy the rest of Tartaria, it don't matter. We've still got so much of this ancient architecture left. I'm
going to change the picture for a moment, for one moment. Hang on.
There's still.
Put the picture of Notre Dame up now. I've seen it saying that it was built in the end of the 10th century, but they're saying the 11th century, and even if it's the 11th century, that's still 10 centuries ago, isn't it? No, 10,000 years ago.
No, it'd be 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, sorry, 1,000 years ago.
According to their timeline, but I mean the magnificence.
But look at it.
The magnificence of this structure. So let's take everything else out of the equation. What we spoke about so far with the architecture, Christian. I want anyone to look,
they've rebuilt it with just one steeple in the middle.
I want anyone to look me in the eye and say to me that this place was built without any power tools and whatever in the 11th century. It's impossible. It's impossible. I want anyone to tell me because the mainstream is going to tell us. If someone's to sort of like Google now, how was Notre Dame built in the 11th century, and they're just going to say like with hammer and chisels.
Did you see that? They've just got one steeple now. They've rebuilt it with just one steeple.
With master stonemasons. Sorry, one steeple. Yeah.
It didn't. It had more. It had other things on there. Look, it's got other things sticking up, but they put one steeple on it.
So the mainstream is going to say all it was sort of like was scaffolding made out of sort of like bamboo, probably like, and then a few master stonemasons. Well, if anyone buys that. That they need help as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, some of our researchers out there, we believe that levitation was used, that vibration and levitation, that they had the knowledge of levitation through vibration, which is feasible to the point. But when you see the exquisiteness of the carvings on so many major buildings, you think, well, what sort of technology did that, and how did they manage to achieve it worldwide? Your mind away. And then you see a marble sculpture, all one piece, and if you just go wrong once, you have to start again. And some of these pieces, they are so exquisite, that you think, and the size of them, and even the statue of David is huge, it's humongous. There's so many mysteries, but they're not a mystery if we go back and think, well, it was a previous civilization that had more technology than what we do today in a modern day life. Yes, we've got modern technology as a computer or phone, but that's as far as the reach goes. That's all, and we don't even know how it works, how it operates, or how to fix it.
That's right. Well, in a previous podcast, I did this. I was speaking about this sarcophagus that they found and the guy turned around and said, I think I might have seen it on one of the Discovery channels, and the guy turned around and said to one of the top stonemasons, can you mimic this? Can you make it? And he said, we have techniques. We've got laser cutters and whatever that we can use. But when he done it, when they looked at it under the microscope, it still wasn't the same, Christian. It still had ridges in it. He couldn't get rid of the ridges. The ridges,
Yeah.
you could see the passes of the laser cutter or whatever. And he had to hold his hands up and said, no, I cannot do it. So, we're obviously, if you ask someone from the mainstream, they're going to turn around and say, oh yeah, it was a guy with a hammer and a sort of like a copper chisel or a brass chisel, like, who chiselled that out, and he was such a brilliant stonemason, he managed to sort of like perfect the technique of doing it.
Why is this church?
Well, we know that's absolute rubbish.
Why has this church got all these things coming out of it? And we have it, obviously have them in London as well.
Yeah.
There are churches which look like this, but why do they have all those bits coming off of it?
Well, maybe like they was. I think churches like had several uses. Maybe free energy machines is one of them, because when we were speaking about in the last show, Christian, about the red mercury and the gold that was taken from a lot of these structures, they had some form of free energy where there was no moving parts. Do you concur with that? Maybe.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, they were resonators. They were power stations. When you see the way that some of them being built.
Because if you sort of like, because they have got some free energy machines now that people have made, but they've got working parts. So really, they're not free energy machines, because bearings, wear, it doesn't matter what material you use. They seem to have some kind of knowledge to draw from the ether. Basically, and free energy machines with no moving parts. You see where I'm coming from?
Look at that.
Yeah, well, I mean,
want to turn it into a swimming pool. That was one of the.
Yeah.
That was one of the proposals, was to rebuild it up and make it into a swimming pool.
Oh, blimey. Yeah, go on.
This is where the tithe comes from, isn't it? Where you had to pay the church a tithe, and I know that's disappeared more or less. And in our modern day age, the last 100 years or so, it became the collection play. It was just because the church had lost its power. And you think, why has the church lost its power? Because
I told you about that. They got
anymore.
everybody into church so they could control them, and then they thought, oh, we're making the television. So, do the Hitler thing. Now it's poo-pooed. Now they watch television.
Well, I mean, all the churches have been hijacked. Sorry, it's okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Now they've poo-pooed the swastika, which seems to relate to all the religions. Then they've poo-pooed the church, and less people went to church after the war. So they got what they wanted. They didn't want people to go to church, but they were getting them ready for the television.
That's right. And also, a lot of people think that these magnificent buildings, like, had a lot to do with cymatics as well, for healing centres. People that are ill, people that are ill, the sound from the organs and whatever. Because I know it's very therapeutic. I remember when I was a kid, like Christian, going into a church with my mum, and if you hear the organ playing, it gives you such a good vibration. You can actually feel it to your very soul. And I think there was multiple uses. Probably them two the main ones, but definitely I would say free energy machines. They've been hijacked into a place of worship, because the thing is, if you want to speak to the creator, you can speak to him direct. You'd have to go and go into somewhere to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't rule out a creator or God entirely, because we are made in the image, so you are part of whatever there is, the way I see it.
We're a fractal of that.
Yeah, it's a piece, like a little piece of the jigsaw, if you like. But you can't rule out creation itself altogether. I'm not a religious nut as such, but you just can't rule it out. When you go back through the time frames and you see that they had higher technology, the further back you go, it's like, how do you explain a drill hole that's in the shape of a star, or a square, or a triangle, and they exist? You think, well, they did have technology, and it's the technology they had was obviously higher than what we had. They were able to mold rocks together or stone together to sit within each other. When you look at the Peruvian walls and buildings and how they built, they were like they stuck to each other, rather than you cannot get a razor blade between them. Even today, and they're all stuck together. It's like they've become a solid form, bit like a tree, if you like. But yeah, when you look at them, your instant thought is it's like they were molded together like putty, like they were putty when they were put together, and that's why they're so robust. Over time they hardened, and they hardened together, you know, like a jigsaw puzzle. When you see the way they were built, you know, and you think, oh, it is almost like a jigsaw puzzle, the way they fit together. I think it's called Polo, whatever it's called. I can't think of what it's called now. But yeah.
I mean, it would be great to hear a lot like what a modern day architect who's brilliant, sort of like in today's sort of like view of engineering, but what he thinks of this kind of stuff. And I mean, they seem to remain remarkably quiet, don't they? Because they don't like everyone else. They don't like going against the mainstream at all. But you know, you'd have to ask them. You know, could they possibly design something like this, and could they get builders to build these kind of magnificent structures? I listen. I might sort of like really annoy like architects and builders and all that. They might turn around and say, "Oh yeah, of course we can." But the thing is, if that's the case, Christian, how comes it hasn't been replicated?
Exactly. They can't replicate it in the modern day, can they?
No.
You know, it's just so instrumentally designed that it's next to impossible. When you see the way they build these days, it's like a quick skeleton frame with a bit of plaster of Paris, if you like. So that's how they're building a day.
That's what I said. There's nothing grand. You know, so they wiped us out today like they wiped the well, we're calling them Tartarians. There's nothing much will be left in our wake.
No, I mean, when you look at the shard...
They'll be showing wimpy houses.
I mean, the shard's been built with a lot of glass, hasn't it? And it's more or less like a tower or an obelisk made out of glass, and more or less a representation of what Crystal Palace was, but just a different shape.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
We've been going for an hour and 11 minutes. Did you want to talk about anything else? We've done quite a lot already.
Because it's all pretty connected, this one, isn't it? Like,
is there anything else? Let's turn it off for a second. 1 second, everybody. Right, we're finishing off this video, but the bit that both Christian and Gary don't like is this incubator thing.
No, it's what we started off on, and to be honest with you, it was quite upsetting, unnerving for me when I first watched it this morning, and Karen left me. I watched it on my own, and I had a bit of a lump in my throat, and I felt quite uneasy about it. But obviously, we've got to look at all this stuff because it is all connected, Christian, and like you know, as distasteful as what it is, we're trying to sort of like decipher all the reasoning behind it.
And this is just the excuse for us that they found this.
Yeah.
This is what it is, but this isn't true either.
I mean, you know, we're always talking about sort of like human engineering and one thing now, but this is human engineering on a different level altogether, Christian, isn't it?
Yeah, it's human engineering on a mass scale, and you wonder why that when you watch television in the past that you get these programs where they're doing lost family and whatnot and people being reconnected, like some of these have been in their 70s and 80-year-olds, and you think, oh, I've got a sister, and they find out that they've been transported. They may well have been, you know, I'm going back about 10, 15, 20 years ago, that they may have been part of this program, whatever this program was, because that's what it seems like it was a program to reintroduce...
I'm just quite amazed that in the 1850s they had incubators, especially as, you know, they told my parents, I was an incubator baby.
It's dumbfounding.
And they told my parents they weren't sure if I'd live.
And that's why so many people are inquisitive about where they come from, who their relatives were, and what they're connected to.
We're never going to find them, are we, though?
You know,
we're never going to find them. And we might even say, oh, well, they came from Germany, but it's going to stop there because they were all orphan children.
I mean, the thing is, what me and Karen say to each other all the time, Christian, where the hell are we? What is this place? What is the meaning of it all? And the thing is, you know, sometimes you think to yourself, you wish... I was saying to Karen, I'm glad a lot of my family are not in the true community, only because, like, you know, we're a good few years down the line now. But all this stuff, that even this alone, I would never show to them because I think it would do their head in, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it was when I came quite some time back now. I don't know how many years ago. I came across this mud fossil guy, one of the original guys that started on mud fossils in Canada, and I asked that same question: where are we? You know, we're told we live on a planet Earth, and evolution of it went through the catastrophe of the dinosaurs and whatnot. But when you start to discover
it's all
various other
rubbish.
things,
It's all rubbish, the whole lot.
I can't get over the fact that they had incubators in the 1850s.
And you know, even the technology behind making them things there
I mean,
is
she's got
quite,
a shorter skirt, hasn't she, that
yeah.
one? So they're lying to us and putting the 1950s in the 1850s.
Do you know what always amazes me when you see all these photographs, Christian? It don't matter what job they're doing, like well the males especially, they've always got a blinking suit on.
Yeah, like that one.
You know, it's like you know you're going sort of like I don't know, down a coal mine or something. Like, you see them like they're going down with a
Do you
suit.
remember him? That boy's got a lump on the back of his head.
Yeah, a suit and a tie.
I know exactly what you mean. It's like in a lot of these pictures where you see like a city that's been devastated. They're wearing suits, they've got a bowler hat, there's not a spit of dust on them, and you think, how is that even possible? And there's not just one, two of them, there's like tons of them, and you think, how haven't they got any dust on them? You know, it's like the new arrivals to a place that's just been devastated. It doesn't make any sense, and you've got the.
Well, when you think the National Health took over from this lot, I don't think I like it very much. Well, I'm not sure what that place is anymore.
No, it's like you don't like saying too much, but a lot of what you've heard going on the last year and a half, Christian, you wonder what's really going on behind the scenes. You know, you really do.
Yeah, the Orphan is just a distraction of the reality of the place that we live in, and it has been a huge distraction, and it's one that dictates rather than promotes. You know, it's dictating that you shouldn't have this, you shouldn't have that. You know, and it's alienating us as a human race. It's like we're finding ourselves, and I mean that we're finding ourselves. We're trying to communicate with each other on a better level. Then all of a sudden, this comes along. And it destroys that.
To be honest with you, Christian,
the communications.
I think me and Karen was saying this the other night that this was pretty much all what's going on the last year and a half was pretty much rushed through them up. You know, that's why they're making so many errors. For people like us, we was waking up too many people. It was like the truth, and this probably happened in history as well, where people were like us are sort of like, but of course. We were told like they didn't have communication devices. Now, let's say back in the 18th century they didn't have. It looks like they had everything that we had, even more. If they didn't have communication devices, people had to sort of like speak to people about these things. Now we've got all this social media and computers and all the rest of it. We're conversing in a different way, and it's amazing.
Can I just say this woman, right? When you look at this picture, she's not 1850s, and neither is he.
No, they look more modern.
And that guy put him in the 1850s, but he's not. This is 1950s. It's 100 years on.
Well, I mean, you saying that, I told you about a video that you released where you found that the shadowing of the woman walking past with a pram is totally out of concept, and it did appear that way. But in that video, a bit later on, there's a guy. Everybody is wearing what Gary just said, the suits, the black suits, and the bowler hat. And there must be, I think, a few hundred in the video clip.
I think someone's lying to us. I think they've added 100 years on, and we're talking of the 1950s.
And then this one guy, he appears in a suede jacket, suede trousers.
Christian. Look at what she's wearing.
Yeah, the clothing isn't right.
She's not wearing Victorian stuff, and that bloke's in it, the one holding the babies.
Yeah. But surely we'd have heard about these sort of like farms, these baby farms, the premature baby farms. If it was only the 1950s, we'd have heard about it, wouldn't we?
But we didn't. We didn't even hear about incubators until I think the late 60s. You know, I never heard about incubators until.
Well, I was in one. I was 1963.
You know, and then you realise that they had them 100 years prior. And you think, well, it's technology again.
No, I'm saying they didn't. None of the pictures add up.
Well,
they've got short skirts on, Christian. They're the 1940s, 1950s.
I see what you're saying. That the actual length of the dress should have been a lot longer.
Yeah, it's the man who's holding some of the babies in it, and the other guy's saying, well, that's 1850s. But you know these ones do have long skirts on, so these ones could be older, but even in the 1920s, 1930s, they'd have looked like that.
Yeah, this is why I say to you, you've got to stay grounded and you've got to be really exceptionally good at your discernment to understand what you're seeing, to really comprehend that certain things might have been photoshopped. I mean, as Martin says in some of his old pictures, you can clearly see that some of even the older photographs have been deliberately people have been taken out of the picture or whitewashed out of the picture. So you know Photoshop's been around a lot longer than we're being told. But yeah, it makes it very difficult to discern, and it keeps you confused. But this is why I say you've got to stay grounded, because it's important.
That's right. And I mean, the thing is, you know, the more you do look at this picture now, it looks more kind of, it looks from sort of like, say, 45 to 55, doesn't it? That kind
Well,
of
they
time.
could be a little bit old. They could be the 1920s, but then I don't know if everything's the 1850s.
But I mean, you know, the orphan trains like obviously existed, and you know, the
It's just horrible to think they're telling you, even if they're using younger pictures, that in those times they had 80,000 babies just in America and the rest.
it's still
I
that.
mean, we've all got our own opinions about certain things, but when you look at what's happening today, right, the evils are being put on a lot of people. They're being pushed into a corner to accept what's going on, not by ease, but being pushed into it. And when you think, well, it's like evil versus good yet again, and I think this is prolific going through our history, that it's like you got one human race and you got another human race. And in ancient past, as you know, they call themselves the aristocrats or the enlightened ones, you know. And when you think about you're going back through the ages, and it's been more or less like it, and it's always been the masses that have been sent to war with each other. And then you find out that the top elites, they never send their own, and even sometimes when they want to go, they're pushed in a position where they're going to be put in command, and they're never going to do any fighting. You know, when you start realising this, even like Winston Churchill, all the prolific, lovely, heroic stories, but does anybody know that he actually served on the front line, saw him fighting, you know, being injured? You know, it's all hearsay. But when you realise that this is the battle, it's like good versus dark, light versus dark, or good versus evil. And we know that some of us are genuine in what we say, and genuine in what we're trying to research, and genuine trying to understand where we live in this world, or what we live in.
Exactly, and of course, you know, it's almost a certainty now that sort of like most of these wars, there might be some exceptions, but I would say almost certainly the First and Second World War was a scripted event, like what's currently going on. You know, we can see it as clear as a bluebell, like on a hot summer's day. You know, the current events is like is a scripted reality. Now, obviously, the wars are pretty much the same, but you know, there was people like us in the two world wars that sort of like didn't want to go out to fight. I mean, you know, even the Falklands War, like we were told like it might have been for completely nefarious reasons. You know, it seemed pretty cut and dry, but we never really know because the script writers are only feeding the information down to the people, the upper echelons, and the people on the shop floor never really get to know.
Yeah, look at that. It says the incubator babies of Coney Island.
Coney Island, yeah. And unless you get sort of like a discerning view on things, like we all do, Christian, you just go along with the narrative because you know no one ever questions anything, and you know this is a common trait through history. Where you can see what's happening at the moment, because all I get with current events, you know, we have to be very careful what we say with current events. Why would they do it? Why would they do it? That's all I ever get. If I ever get, I'll get why. You know, and it's like where do I start? You know.
Yeah, it's like you said about World War One. Why wasn't it resolved? What was current for the time? They used to have duels, sword duels still, gun duels. Why wasn't it sorted out that way? You know, at the end of the day, it's just one man. You know, why couldn't that have been sorted out via a duel? Because that's what they did prolifically in them days. And then all of a sudden, oh no, we all got to go to war, being pushed into war. You know,
with all those millions of soldiers. If there was no people, where did all the soldiers come from?
Exactly. Yeah, it's.
Do you know what? There are older pictures in here. I mean, Even like that one, that's just like, even that's supposed to be an incubator, it's just a box. So there are, I mean, he's got one of those bowyer hats on, you know, he looks a bit older and he's holding this little baby up. So maybe they just used younger pictures to try and tell their story.
But that's the thing. I mean, like that program I was seeing this morning, it was about Charlie Chaplin's life story, you know, and a lot of people thought he should have he should have gone to war and one thing or another, like in much latter times, like the same thing they did to Muhammad Ali. And you know, Muhammad Ali was obviously like a sort of like a conscientious objector of latter times. Maybe Charlie Chaplin was the same, but a lot of people stopped going to see his movies because he wouldn't sort of like, maybe he got his papers and he said, look, I'll tell you what I'll do, I'll go around and sort of like entertain the troops or whatever. But you know, when people say to me, I'll get like, oh, Gal, you know, you're a relatively new thing. I don't think we are, Christian. We are. There was people like us around. It's just they were brushed under the carpet. You know, they probably turned out to Charlie Chaplin and said, don't sort of like say anything, but we're going to give you a job just entertaining the troops. But you know, I've always felt the way. Why should I go? And obviously, like, you know, if you're fighting the Germans fought the same way as us. It's. I mean, if you remember, in the Second World War, especially, because I come from not far from Clerkenwell originally, and they got a really big Italian community down there. When the war started, they all got put in internment camps over here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, when you go back to World War One, the soldiers on both sides got so fed up fighting each other that they decided one day, no, that's it, right along the front line, all the way along it, and they decided to hold peace for that one day, that Christmas day. And
they played football, didn't they?
The minute the generals heard about this, they fired on their own men. Now,
really?
What sort of person does that? Firing on their own men. That's not friendly fire.
No, that tells me,
that's
Christian, that tells me that the people didn't want to fight. And that's what that was about.
Yeah. Well, another thing...
And the people don't want to fight today.
That's right.
And I see like General Patton's life story, right? And he turned around and said, and it's even said in the film, who's, I'm just trying to think who the actor was, a big famous actor, he's dead now. It was George somebody. Anyway, the guy that played Patton, and he said like
George C. Scott.
George C. Scott. Thank you very much. Yeah, because he's a very good actor. Anyway, he turned around and said when sort of like a whole battalion.
He was a good actor.
Yeah, a whole battalion was wiped out by his troops, a German battalion. He turned around and said, we're fighting the wrong enemy, because obviously him being an elite, he knew what was going on behind the scenes. And that was his way of saying, you know, we're fighting the wrong enemy, because he knows like all these people are just doing what they're told, but really the people that should be being bloody killed is the one that orchestrated it all.
Yeah, I mean, I can go back to scripture as far as what's actually going on in the world. When you look, it's always the masses. I mean, the average Joe doing the fighting, you know, that's why they're called dogs of war. We are the dogs, you know, and in the past, in certain paintings, illustrations and pictorials, you've got the dog people. Is that the masses? Is that us? We are the dog people?
Yeah.
You know, being like cattle or whatever. You know, when you put it, you know, you got to remember that somebody's being done in allegory, yeah? And that depicting us, the dog people, you know, we were created just to be dogs of war, you know, and this is prolific throughout history. You know, you can go back through any war, it's always the masses. And it's the same, this is what I was trying to tell Karen about the War of the Roses. It's the same people for 100 years, the same families, depicting, oh, we must go to war, we must go to war.
Yeah.
But yet, but somehow they always survive. They always survived. And they come back to reform another army, and another army, and another army.
That one went on for about 70, 80 years, the War of the Roses. And instead of just telling us it was about, what were the people? There was the Lancasters, and then there was, I can't think of the other ones, but the ones before that, what were they called?
I'm not sure.
The Yorkshires.
No, whatever they were called. Yeah, they were all the same. Even when they changed their name to the Yorks and all that, they were all the same people. Why not tell us that? Anyway, listen, we've been going for an hour and a half. We're going to finish shortly.
But you know something, Christian, sort of like on a similar note, which which still causes division, like total division, like, and people got their own sort of like look at what used to happen like in the early 80s, like with all the football violence. It's absolutely ridiculous. You've got like you've got football teams in this country.
None of that was real either.
No, oh, it was. Believe me, a lot of that was real. No, it was. A lot of it was real. They used to go. So
how do you know?
Because I know people that used to be involved in it.
Yeah, but then maybe they made those fights, but when they put it on here, it was all over the top.
Believe me, people went in hospital and everything. I mean, you know, my point is, you've always had this thing where they keep people. They want to conquer and divide. They want to keep people in division. You know, wars, whether it's wars against nations or wars against football team. You know, and that's why I stopped going to football, Christian, because people that I know used to get involved in all this bloody violence.
Yeah, anyway.
On the terraces. It's terrible. It's all division.
Gary, do you want to... Will you finish and then Christian can finish?
Yeah, well, basically, I'm just saying, like, you know, we're smart enough to sort of, like, see through all the bull crap and, you know, we just carry on with doing the work we're doing. And I hope people like what we're doing. If they, you know, put them in the comments what you think about what we said.
I mean, this video that we've taken the pictures of is very like one. I'm going to probably put it out on the Unscrambled channel. But it's when he was talking about all this stuff, it's very close to all the things I've been talking to Christian about. Well, and you, but Christian as well. But anyway, you finished?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, fine.
Christian?
Yeah, my last word would be is exactly what Gary's saying, is that the major point being is everything they do from top level is to ensure division and between people, and forgetting that humanity is a loving race. We are a loving race. Most of us don't want to fight. We want to cherish our neighbour, get along. But yeah, it's like Gary said, everything they do is to create division and forgetting all about love, happiness, joy. This is what's happening in the current situation today, isn't it? They're separating the nuclear family more and more. They're now ensuring that kids hate their parents more, you know, because of the way it's all being pushed into the mainframe. So yeah, I agree with Gary. Everything they're doing is separating the family, separating people. You know, when we should be rejoicing the fact that we're alive and we should love each other.
Because the thing is, Christian, if everyone was to sort of like suddenly take a step back and have some discerning thought like we have, and realise what's happening, and everyone got on with one another, it's all over for them, and they can't have that. That's why they got to keep on doing this. Because once everyone lives in peace and harmony, it's all over for them.
Well, we have been. We've never been any different. They've done all this over and above us.
It's all done. It's all, yeah, that's right. And
they're pretending that all this stuff is going on when it isn't. The wars, the problems.
It's all over by the shouting, mate. It's all over.
None of them are happening.
Do you agree? It's all over by the shouting.
Yeah, and I think it's because people, like I said earlier, that people are beginning to question their reality to the point where a friend of mine just said that a NASA employee took both injections and she asked him what was in it. And he said, well, I don't know. I said, well, you're a NASA employee and you're taking something that you have got no idea what it does. You know, that just goes to show
I said the same myself to members of my family. You don't even know what's in it, but we can't talk that much about that.
Listen to this, right, Gary. Christian, very quickly. No, I'm not going to speak too much. But I was watching a video this morning about veganism, and you know, I'm a vegan myself, and there was two guys on it, and it's like Karen said, you might as well turn it off. They was asked like whether they've had like the whatnot, and they turned around and said yes. They said, well, do you know what's in it? And they said, no. I said, that's it. And they're meant to be two vegans. So really, that's it in a nutshell, isn't it? This is what society's come. No one investigate apart from us. No one seems to investigate. They just do what they're told. They just go along.
It's exactly the point.
Why would they want to put bits of monkeys?
Yeah. And
anyway, we can't talk very much. We can't talk
very much about that. But you know where I'm coming from, Christian. That people just go along with a narrative without questioning anything. We are questioning things, and we need not millions. We need billions of people to do the same as us, but they don't. They just go along with it, and you know, throughout history. I mean, the thing is, my dad like fought in the Second World War, and you know, if he was alive today, could be technically alive today, he'd be up in his 90s or something. But I think I'd break his heart if I turned around and said, "You fought behind German enemy lines for the wrong reason, Dad." You know, he'd probably never speak to me again. But we realised that's what did happen. They were, you know, people just were told what they done, what they were told, and that was it. And they thought they were doing it for the greater good, not realising, looking into it deep enough to realise what was going on. You know, some people did, but most people didn't.
Yeah, I mean, Vietnam was one of the instamatic examples of that when
Look
people
at
start
that. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 babies between 3 nurses.
Oh right, yeah. Yeah, go on. Sorry, Christian.
Anyway, Christian, last words.
Yeah, last words would be Vietnam, when people started realising that there's a war being fought and nobody knows what the war is about. Nobody knew. You know, only the very top people knew what that war was about. And there was such a rebellion in America about the Vietnam War that they actually they had to quit, didn't they? So, yeah.
And if you remember that song in 1985, Paul Hardcastle, no, 19, he must have been quite a weight, because the average age that was sent to Vietnam was 19 years old. And I mean, when you're not, I know when I was 19, you think you know everything, but basically you know nothing, do you?
Exactly.
Anyway, we're going to finish.
Okay, it's been a wonderful. Maybe we can do.
Because you two could go on talking for hours.
We could go on for hours.
Oh yes, yes. We've only started scratching the surface.
Of things. The thing is, I like doing hangouts with you, Christian, because you push me to another level, and then it gets me thinking. You might mention something that I haven't thought of, and then I think, hang on a minute, I've seen something on the TV, and then I can interject. You know, so it's great that we do these, because I think we can take each other sort of like up to another level, even within our community. It's great.
Mm.
I think if we had a pint in the pub, we'd be there all weekend.
I think what they would do, they would put like a couple of chairs out and just leave us and lock up and say, "You help yourself."
Well, I do appreciate you talking. We've kind of just looked at the video of that what was he called? The guy whose video that was.
Oh, the guy, I can't even say EWA or something.
Yeah, we've been looking at his video, but it sort of just fits into all the things that we've been talking about, and obviously I've been telling Gary. But I do appreciate you both coming on and helping, guys.
It's fantastic. I really appreciate it. We'll have to do another one again very soon, Christian. And I hope all the people in the chat and other people listening think likewise, because I always thoroughly enjoy our little get-togethers,
Yeah, it's been brilliant. There's nothing like promoting a bit of the truth, so that people out there can comprehend the realistic side of the world that we live in.
Yeah, the real world, not the sort of like hijacked fake reality that we're presented with on the TV and on radio and in newspapers and everything else.
Yeah.
Well, I very much appreciate both your time, and
fantastic.
I don't know what to make of it all. It just doesn't look real.
The
and
thing
then
is,
you think if it is, then oh my God, what are we in? What are we living in?
Well, once you think you've got it all sussed out, like a few years ago, we was all looking at sort of like the shape of the earth and what we know. I'm not going to mention it, but we was looking at various things, and then one rabbit hole leads to another, doesn't it? And it's never ending.
Oh, that's right. But anyway, guys, thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Gary, Christian,
and cheers, mate. Love you, mate. Speak again soon.
And chat room.
Chat room as well. Yeah, lovely.
Thanks a lot for watching our video, and hopefully it all made sense.
Hope so.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.